Welcome to Daily Focus, and I'm glad that you have joined me this morning. We're in the book of Proverbs, and we've been looking at scriptural truths to help us each day. Today we want to look at being a positive influence, a proper influence, really a biblical influence. I told you yesterday that leadership is really influence, not control. Those who think that influence is control misunderstand God's design. He made it very clear in the book of Mark in chapter 10 that influence is brought about by serving, meeting the needs of people, genuinely loving them, caring for them. And he said, if you want to be a great leader, then make sure that you serve people. If you want to be the best leader, then be a bondslave, and ultimately a bondslave to Christ, and make sure that you are exalting Christ as a good leader. My wife is making things really loud. I know you can hear that in the background, but we're all good now. But leadership is going to be about influence, and influence is rooted in serving. So as we look at the text today, we're going to continue the thoughts of what we learned about yesterday. And so in verse number 19, it says, "Better it is to be of a humble spirit with the lowly than to divide the spoil with the proud. He that handleth a matter wisely shall find good, and whoso trusteth in the Lord, happy is he. The wise in heart shall be called prudent, and the sweetness of the lips increaseth learning." Or the idea of that word learning in the Hebrew gives us this idea of tools to persuade. Or we could maybe in application say tools to influence. And so when you look at verse 21, the heart of the wise shall be called prudent, and the sweetness of the lips increaseth learning, or your ability to persuade or influence. Understanding is a wellspring of life unto him that hath it, but the instruction of fools is folly. The heart of the wise teacheth his mouth, or the idea of disciplines his mouth, and addeth learning, or the tools to persuade, or the opportunity to influence. The heart of the wise teacheth his mouth, and addeth learning to his lips. Pleasant words are as a honeycomb, sweet to the soul, and health to the bones. There is a way that seemeth right unto a man, but the end thereof are the ways of death. He that laboreth for himself, for his mouth craveth it of him. An ungodly man diggeth up evil, and in his lips there is a burning fire. A froward man soweth strife, and a whisperer separateth chief friends. So God is teaching us about influence. He's teaching us about leadership. He's teaching us that if we want to influence people for the cause of Christ, if we want to influence people to glorify God, to come to a right conclusion about who He is and what He's like, if we want to influence people properly in this world, then there are some principles here that we can glean if that's really what we want. Now, it warns us, if we're all about ourselves, if we're laboring to get ahead, if we're laboring for ourselves and what we want, if we're working hard to get all we can and can all we get and sit on the lid, as some would say, if it's all about the man with the most toys wins, if it's all about just getting what we can from this life and enjoying this life, well, there is a way that seems right unto a man, but the end thereof are the ways of death. In other words, selfishness brings consequences. And over again in the book of Proverbs do we see the fruit of selfishness. But it also reminds us that there's an alternative, there's a contrast, and in that contrast is health, and there is life, and there is reward. There is fulfillment. As I counsel in the world today, there's so many people looking for fulfillment. And part of the way that we satisfy our deep desire to fulfill is to serve the Lord by serving people, by meeting the needs that people have, legitimately sharing with people the gospel who so desperately need Jesus Christ, making sure that we come alongside the downhearted and sorrowful and to strive to comfort them with the comfort that the Spirit of God has given to us, and really comfort, allowing the Spirit of God to comfort people through us as a vessel. That's really what it talks about in 2 Corinthians chapter 1. And so we're going to be looking for opportunities to be a blessing. I think we should be using our skill set. We should be using our gifting. We should be using our talents in a way to influence people for good, to really show forth the love of Christ, to be able to show forth a servant's heart towards God and what He's entrusted to us and how we can meet the needs of people. There is incredible fulfillment there. But the Bible is teaching us there is also incredible influence there. And that type of influence is proper. It is right. And so when we look right off the bat and see there in verse number 21 that the wise in heart shall be called prudent. In other words, when you apply biblical principles, you apply the character of Christ. You obey in being conformed to the image of Christ, really staying on the path of wisdom, which is the perfect will of God. As we stay on this path and we don't deviate, you're going to be called prudent. But it gives to us another important aspect, and that is the sweetness of the lips increases learning. In other words, our opportunity to encourage those around us, our opportunities to invest in those around us, those opportunities to be kind, to be edifying, to be uplifting, ultimately positive as we talk about God, His program, His promises, what He has provided for us. These are things that God has done, and we should speak much of God. We should speak highly of God. In fact, it should just roll off our lips. However, it warns us that there is a contrast, and verse number 27 gives us that contrast. It says, an ungodly man diggeth up evil. Have you ever had somebody that spends all their time researching how they can dig up something about someone? They want to spend all their time digging up dirt on somebody. It seems like we live in a political, hostile environment that is just constantly trying to dig up dirt, constantly trying to expose dirt, constantly trying to spread dirt. And God says, yeah, if that's you, then you're ungodly. You're not a positive biblical influence. You may be influencing. You may have some followers, but you are an ungodly person. And what happens is when you dig up evil, there's a stirring inside that says, I gotta share it. I gotta tell somebody. I gotta see who all wants to know this information. The Inquirer became a multi-million-dollar industry because inquiring minds want to know. People who love gossip and love dirt and want to know the latest and what's going on in people's lives. God says, you know what? Is that you? Is that you? Well, God's assessment of your life is not that you are a godly influence, but that you are an ungodly influence. And then he says, a froward man, this type of person, soweth strife. And the result is he separates good friends. And why? Because he thought he was right. And there is a way that seems right. But the ends, there are serious consequences. So as we look at the text, let's just determine, you know what? Let's use our influence. Let's use our opportunity to speak. Let's use our opportunity to serve in a way where God is glorified, where the path of wisdom is taught and explained so that people can follow it. I hope this will be a help to you. Let's go out and influence people for the cause of Christ together. May God bless you. Have a great day.